world of economics and how you use your money is changing dramatically every day. The world is never going to be the same. Right now, politically, everything is being thrown out of whack. What you learned in the past of what to do with money, what happens with the economy, is not the case anymore. We have to understand what's being done in order to survive, in order to thrive, and not lose everything you have because of politicians that are playing with your investments and your currency. To begin with, the United States is playing an enormous game with the world economy. The Federal Reserve is creating right now an enormous amount of dollars that it's infusing into the system that it's never seen before in history. This is something that's creating a problem that's being felt around the world because the US dollar works with the euro dollar and the petrodollar. The petrodollar is what the US dollar is politically. There is a government agreement up to this point where every government in the world agrees to use the US dollar in order to buy oil. In addition to that, the euro dollar exists because the government agreements included that the governments around the world will pay for everything that's shipped in international commerce with dollars. That means that every time a European has to buy, every time another government outside of the US has to buy anything, they have to exchange their currency for dollars. Whatever happens with that, that's the exchange rate, and that's what happens with the cost of having to do business. If you want to buy oil and you're in Italy, you have to convert your Italian euros into dollars, and then you have to give the Saudis euros or dollars in order to get the money back or get your product. That was working for 40 years. But what's happening now is the government of the United States, through the Federal Reserve and through the enormous spending of the Democratic administration at this point, it's throwing everything for a loop and it's making things just go crazy. One of the things that's happened is the Federal Reserve began to increase the rate of money, how much it costs. So it's increasing the interest rates on dollars. What that's doing, it's making us feel the pain. It's causing, by increasing the interest rates, the stock market is beginning to suffer because for all these years, since 2002 actually, the stock market has been running on basically free money. Well, since 2008, definitely it's been acting on free money. Interest rates have been so low, they're almost free. So you can get basically, all the stocks have been pushed up, assets have been inflated because of the stock market. What's happening right now is that the Federal Reserve has been steadily increasing the cost of the dollar by increasing interest rates. Now for us, for the United States, it means some pain. It's bad, but it's not as bad as it is for the rest of the world. And I'll tell you why. Because again, going back to the US dollar, the euro dollar, and the petrodollar, every time our dollars go up, all the rest of the world, England, Germany, Saudis, everybody that has to use the dollar in order to exchange goods is now paying a lot more for those dollars. Something else that happens, the bonds around the world, the investors that have to put their money and park their money somewhere safe, when they see that the interest rates are going up in the United States, they're taking money out of their countries and they're pushing it into the United States. What that happens, the effect that's happening right now is that it's causing banks around the world to be short. It's causing people, it's causing banks, reserves to go through enormous pain. The Swiss banks right now and the British banks right now are going through basically an emergency situation where they're trying to figure out how they're going to make this work. And they're basically being bailed out internationally by the United States Federal Reserve. This is happening right now as we speak. In addition to that, again, one of the things that I want you to remember is this is all involving what is called third-party risk. And third-party risk is whatever you buy, a stock, a bond, or any other type of instrument, a derivative. These are things that are controlled by not just me and you when I hand you something as an investment. It's controlled by third parties that are dealing with it. You have the bank, the stock market, and you have the banks, and you have multiple parties that are running with that liability, which means your investment, whatever you're doing with your money, is under multiple hands. Many different things are going to take place, and in 2008, we saw what that third-party risk did when mortgages were transferred and collateralized into securities, and those securities were then sold by multiple parties, which created a terrible problem when it began to collapse. And once one thing collapses in that game, everything collapses. So this is the way the third party works right now, the third party risk. The stock market, mutual funds, bonds, all of these things are subject to this mercurial change, up and down. This is what you've got to now be careful with. Well, with regards to what the Fed is doing, increasing the cost of money, the Fed is stuck with a position. If the Federal Reserve increases interest rates anymore, it risks breaking the stock market. If it breaks the stock market by increasing interest rates to the point of inflation, which right now is 8.3 declared, the stock market is the inflation rate is 8.3 that they admit to. But actually, what they don't admit to, if you add up, if you base inflation on how we calculated it in 2008, the actual inflation rate is 11%. What that means is, for the Federal Reserve to stop the problem of inflation and actually make anything work, they have to increase interest rates higher than the rate of inflation. They're not going to do that. If they do that, they're stuck in a position where they destroy and wreck the market. If they wreck the market, if the Federal Reserve does what it's supposed to do, it will get this. It will get a recession. And a recession means businesses go bankrupt. It means the stock market goes 50% down. It means a possible or a big slowdown, or it means a depression. So the Federal Reserve has two choices: increase interest rates and stop inflation from going crazy. That's very painful, because that means that every one of us will have very little to do with our money, just like in Venezuela. It means that the dollar will be worth very little every time you go to the supermarket, much less than it is right now. Or it can increase the cost of money and stop inflation and create a recession. And because of the amount that we have as a debt, it could cause a total stoppage, like a train wreck, and create a depression. That's the choice it's going to make. Politically, it's probably going to try and stop inflation. But it's going to do that by not doing the right thing. It's going to do that by going up to maybe 5%. It's going to create both worlds. We're going to get inflation, and we're going to get a recession. which in the 1970s we got, and it was called stagflation. That's what's happening. Now, if you realize the biggest point that they have to deal with right now, then in the 1970s, they didn't have to do. In the 1970s, we did not have a debt to GDP ratio of 125%. That means we owe 125% more than we're taking in our gross domestic product. 125%. That is historic. It's historic, and it's happening right now. For example, let me just give you a comparison. In the year 2000, the GDP ratio, the debt to GDP ratio, was 55.9%. That's in the year 2000. When you've got this much debt, you've got the recipe for disaster. You've got the beginnings of the loss of currency. You've got runaway inflation. You have recession, and you have a depression that could happen at any point. And that's not my opinion. That's now the opinion of even Jamie Dimon, who's now predicting that in the next 6 months, we're going to see at least a recession. Now, when you look at the US dollar, and you look at the euro, and you look at the petrodollar, this is all now in a state of flux. It's changing. As we speak, it's changing. The euro, the dollar, and the petrodollar are now beginning to rethink and reevaluate, and one of the things that's being caused by that is the war in Russia and Ukraine. So, we've got a system that's out of control, and you've got another factor that's also playing its games and sticking its fingers into this, and that's the World Economic Forum. This World Economic Forum has declared on its openly in its sites and books that it's published that its agenda is going to be to control your ability to spend your money. They've already said one of their biggest motto, which is by now should be famous, in 2030 you will own nothing and you will be happy. That is the motto of the World Economic Forum. Now, why is the World Economic Forum important? Because they have taken over most of the leaders of the world. Canada, the United States, Germany, and England all boast its leadership as members of the World Economic Forum. And one of the other things they're going to do is they've already bragged that they're going to stop social protest. Of course, the social protest they disagree with. How are they going to do that? They're going to give you categorizations of how you deal with society. They'll give you points. And those points will mean that if you get the right amount of points, you'll be all right. If you get negative points, they can cut you off. How are they going to cut you off? By creating something that is not the US dollar. They're going to do it based on a digital currency that will be controlled by their Federal Reserve and our Federal Reserve. That means that they can stop your accounts. That means they can stop your credit card. That means they can stop you from spending money if you behave badly. And they decide if you behave badly. They don't even take you to court. They can just take it. They've done it already. They've done it in Canada. The Canadian government, who is the leader of Canada, has been boasted upon by the president of the World Economic Forum as being his most treasured protege. The leader of Canada actually stopped and closed the bank accounts of thousands of people that gave even 10 Canadian dollars to the truckers that were protesting the COVID pandemic. They stopped people for giving money to protesters, not for anything else. That was the beginning. The Australian government has also done the same thing. This is happening already. You don't have to take my word for it. It is a reality. They are now saying this same World Economic Forum has an agenda. And what has that agenda done? That agenda has closed bank accounts in Canada. They've attacked the Dutch farmers in the Netherlands. They decided that the farmers in the Netherlands should not use nitrogen to plant. They decided that the farmers in the Netherlands didn't know how to farm, even though they're the most successful farmers in all of Europe, and they began to take away their rights financially to plant. That was the subject of a major protest. And they did it, before they did it in the Netherlands, they did it in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was another member, the president of the World Economic Forum. He did as he was told. He told all his farmers to stop using fertilizer that they didn't approve of, nitrogen-based fertilizer. He ordered all his farmers to do this. The country has just gone bankrupt and is in a revolution because people were starving to death, because these people ordered these people in Sri Lanka to stop farming the way they knew how to farm. This is happening now. It's happening every day, and it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. They've also declared war on the United States oil industry. They've declared coal immoral. So all of these things are causing us to now suffer, and it's an intentional destruction of the economy. And this is the reason I need to talk to you about what you can do, because this is something that you now have to start taking stock of. If you have your money and your savings in the stock market or in bonds, you have all of your wealth in third-party risk, in another entity that can decide however they want to deal with you. If you have all your money in dollars or in euros, you're at the mercy of the Federal Reserve and how they play with inflation. Because right now, they're creating more money than has ever been created in history. But if you look at the debt, 125% of the United States debt based on the gross national product, that ratio, and you compare that with the true value of gold, I'll show you what most people don't realize. The dollar to gold ratio, based on the number of currency of the dollars that have been created and put into the system, the correct dollar to gold ratio is $7,214 an ounce. That's the correct value of gold. The correct in 1914, by comparison, that was $29. If you compare silver to the amount of money that's being put into the system, the dollar to silver ratio is $979 per ounce if you correctly calculate it, as compared to 1913 when it was $2.65. This is the value that doesn't change. This is real money. This gold and silver does not get printed. It does not get created by some politician and some idiot in a bank that's just printing it up like it was toilet paper. This has value. And when everything comes down, when it's time to exchange and the dollar breaks down and the euro dollar breaks down and the petrodollar, which is going to break down, is in front of all of us, gold and silver is the actual real money that has existed as real money for 5,000 years. 5,000 years it stood the test of all politicians, emperors, kings. It is the only real money. And once you see the world changing and the chaos coming, the only thing that you'll be able to hold on to is what you can control. If you have your money stored, if you have your gold and silver stored out of the system, which is what Atlas does. If you have it in a safe that is outside of the system and outside of your normal jurisdiction, where you can have privacy and safety, which is what Panama is, that is the way you weather the storm that's about to come. You can't stop this, but you can control what you have in your life. And this is coming because politicians are trying to do a lot of things with agendas. They have all kinds of ideas that are based on old communist principles, and they're bringing it in. That's what the World Economic Forum is all about. You can try and do things like buy Bitcoin and digital currencies, except one thing. You have to remember, first of all, Bitcoin is based on nothing. It's based on no money. I have nothing against Bitcoin. But Bitcoin has no intrinsic value that we as society have gathered. It's only been around for 9 years. Now, one of the other things is Bitcoin and other coins have no privacy. Everyone knows how you're going to spend it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when the government decides they don't like what you've said on maybe Facebook or said something on Instagram, and they block you and take your bank account? They just did it to Kanye West for having an opinion. What happens then? Are you going to put your whole life into a government that can close your bank account because they don't like what you say? Get out of the system. Become independent as much as you can. Of course, you have to have bank accounts. You have to be able to exchange the currency that exists, but you don't have to have all of it. You don't have to have all of it there. And that's why you should have gold and silver in a private account that you can hold, that you can take out, and then you can spend it. And it's private. No one else gets to see what you spend with your hard-earned money. That's your business. We at Atlas, through Atlas Broker, can help you with your gold and silver purchases, and we can help you with your storage at Atlas Vault. Give us a call.